the Dragon Table, I'll be going over a tutorial on how to play the brand new game, Dragon Caster. It's a game for 2 or 4 players. I actually think it holds up much better as just a 2-player game rather than a 4-player game. The 4-player game is essentially teams, almost like playing chess with teams, so that's not really my thing personally. I think it holds up better as a 2-player game, but let's take a look. So this is Dragon Caster for 2 players. I've got one Dragon Caster on this side and one Dragon Caster on this side, and they start on space 9 in their kingdom. And the Dragon Casters can only move within the kingdom spaces. They cannot move onto the map. That's where the dragons get put. Each Dragon Caster has a force of dragons at their command. There are 3 different types of dragons. There's water, fire, and earth, and they're all numbered 1 through 9. They all have a special ability that they can use if they're able to absorb mana. And they also have optional abilities. When they're placed out on the board, they can either be placed face up or face down. And the way that they're placed defines which ability they will have available to them while they're moving around the board. The goal of the game is to use your force of dragons to attack your opponent's kingdom until you destroy the kingdom space that this caster is on. So you may end up destroying spaces near them, say like this, and then they won't be able to move because part of your turn can be caster movement, and you can't move through any destroyed kingdom spaces. So you can kind of narrow down where a caster can move and then eventually get them to where they can't move away from your dragon that's attacking. And once you destroy that person's spot, you win the game. But there's a lot of kind of complicated mechanics in the meantime. That being said, it's a fairly quick game. So once you get a hold of the mechanics and you understand how it works in your head, the game itself probably only takes like 15 minutes. It's like, it's a strategy game, but it's pretty fast. Each caster starts with 3 mastery tokens, and either they will either have an arrow on them or not. If there's an arrow on the token, then it designates when that mastery token can be played. For instance, this mana drain token has an arrow that points away from you, which means it can be played on during the other player's turn. This explosive rune token has an arrow that points towards you, which means it can be played on your turn. And there are a bunch of different mastery tokens that have different abilities during the game. I have them face up for the purposes of just knowing what they are for the tutorial version of the game. I recommend playing with them face down. One ability is called Caster Shield, and the Caster Shield can negate anything that's cast by the other player. So if the other player chooses to use one of their mastery tokens to do something that would be negative to me, I could then play Caster Shield and block it. But if they know that I have the Caster Shield, then they might do something different, or they might say do a throwaway move in order for me to get rid of my Caster Shield. So I recommend playing with them face down personally. It's not said in the rule book explicitly if they're supposed to be face up or face down, but that's my personal preference. And this is a bag full of mastery tokens, and the only way you can get more mastery tokens is by blocking out 3 of the same color of mana on your resource board. And each player has their own resource board. The first thing that you're going to do during your turn is you're going to roll your dice, and then you're going to place tokens on your board that equal the same number that you rolled. And that will determine what you can do that turn. So let's do that as an example to see what you can do. So I roll 10. Now I can place my little resource tokens anywhere I want that totals 10. It doesn't have to be 4 and 6 like I rolled. It can be any combination. I could do 1 and 9. I could do 2, 5, and 3. I could do, any combination. But what happens is once you place these tokens out, then you can either summon dragons, or cast dragons, or you can place mana on the board. So that will affect your choices. And like I said, if you block out 3 of the same color, then you can draw another mastery token. But it's not possible to block 3 of the same color in one turn because you can't roll that high. And you have to do, if you get to the point where all of them are, or a lot of them are blocked out, you can unblock instead. You have to do one or the other. You either have to place resource markers down to block numbers, or you have to take them off to unblock. So I've got 10, and let's just say I will do 2, 3, and 5, because that totals 10. And I'm going to choose to cast dragons. Now, in casting dragons, the first one that I cast has to be right in front of me, and I can cast dragons that are worth 2, a 3, and a 5. They do not have to match the mana that I covered up, but they do have to match the numbers that I covered up. So I can choose which numbers to use. Let's say I want to cast a fire 2, so I'll put him here. The next dragons that I cast have to be next to him over here. Let's say I'll do a 3 water, and I'll put him here. And then I'll do a 5 earth 1. And I'm going to flip him over and use his vine side. If you have him face up, it's burrow, which lets you go underneath barriers. This side is vine side, which lets you pull dragons towards you. So then you do a dragon movement. When you cast a dragon, that counts as their first move, and dragons can move 1 or 2 spaces each turn. They can only move towards the other kingdom. They cannot move backwards at all. So these guys cannot move here. They have to move this way. So in essence, they have 1 move left if I choose to use it. So I'm going to move him forward 1, him forward 1, and him forward 1 is what I'll do for that. And that's how you get dragons out on the board. Now, later, what you could do is, if you do your roll and then you place your resource tokens out, you could instead then place mana. And mana are these tokens over here, and they must be placed in the same color. There's little spots on the board that show you where mana can be placed. So green mana can be placed on the forest, blue mana can be placed on water, and red mana can be placed on mountains. So I could place, say, a green mana there with the intention of then being able to move on top of it, which would let me pick it up. And then I get to move my dragon with this mana on it, and then at any time that I wanted to, I could absorb the mana and use that dragon's ability. And then that mana would go back. But the other player has a turn first, so he would do the same thing. He would roll 2 dice. He rolls a 9. And he could choose 9 if he wanted to. If he wanted to get a real high-powered dragon out first, he could do that. But generally, it's a strategy game. So let's say he does 4 and 5. I don't know why. We're just going to say he does 4 and 5, and he pulls out 4 fire, and he places that in front of him. And then he's going to do a 5, and let's say he does a 5 fire, but he does the opposite side. And 5 fire on the opposite side is lightning, and that allows you to turn another dragon into a barrier, which is these tokens. If you turn another dragon into a barrier, then no dragons can move through that space, unless you have an earth dragon, which is this guy, and he has to have absorbed mana. He can then move through the barrier by burrowing. So now this guy would, and also this guy, at the end of my turn, I would have been allowed to move 1 to 3 spaces. And these guys would be able to move. So let's say he moves 1 and he moves, let's make him move 1 forward as well. So once your dragon's on the board, they always have to move each turn either 1 or 2 spaces. You can't not move your dragon. That keeps the game going. And you also have these options of these different mastery tokens that will give you other things you can do during your turn. But let's look at what happens when you get into combat. Let's say we'd gotten into a situation where these two dragons had gotten into a combat. In other words, they'd both gotten onto the same space. In that case, what you do is you're both going to roll 2 dice. So I rolled a 7 for this dragon, and that dragon rolled a 4. So what you do then, there are 2 things that you do. You're going to add the number that's on the dragon. So I would add 3 to the 7, that would be 10. He would add 5 to the 4, that would be 9. And you'd think, oh, well, that means this dragon wins. No, wait a second. Because right here you'll see a little circle or a little cycle where green is ahead of blue and blue is ahead of red and red is ahead of green. What that means is that when blue is fighting red, it actually gets +3. So he does win the fight by more than 1 point because he gets +3 because he's fighting a red dragon. So what happens is this dragon is then discarded from the game. And if he had had any mana, that would go back into the supply. So that dragon would be removed from the game. Once you get a dragon all the way down into the kingdom area, then he moves onto a kingdom space and he can make an attack. You do that by rolling 1 die and adding your strength. So that's an 8. That's kind of a high spot for me to be trying with a 3. So you get 2 plus 3, that's only 5. So he doesn't do any damage, and this would get placed back in my dragon pool, whether it's successful or not. So you could get a dragon all the way down the board and then not actually accomplish anything. So you want to be careful about making sure you choose which dragons are going to be going to attack which spaces. I wouldn't recommend sending a 3 to attack an 8 because that means that you have to roll a 6 in order to destroy that space. Now, if we get into a combat, let's say we have another combat that happens, and let's say it ends up in a tie. Let's say we roll our dice, we add our strength, and we add the modifier from the cycle, and it ends up in a tie. What happens then? Well, in a tie, both the dragons are removed from the board, and the person who was the aggressor, let's say in this situation it was that guy, let's say he attacked my dragon. Both dragons get removed, and the attacker gets to roll the surge die. And the surge die will give him a benefit, and he will possibly, in this case, it gives him a space boost. And that goes on the space where the dragons were located. Now, anytime he moves a dragon through that space, it gets to move extra. The other option would be a portal. And in a portal situation, you could cast a dragon in front of a portal. So you could and then the portal would go away. So you would get a bonus for getting your dragon casted farther out. So it does pay to be the aggressor in these fights in the case of a tie. So don't be afraid to be the aggressor because it can pay off with that surge die. If you're ever able to exactly fill your resource pool, and that is exactly, it means you can't have any leftover numbers, you can't, you have to roll the exact numbers to fill your resource pool, then these get cleared. You would get to do one of these. You either can put an elder dragon into your pool, ooh, elder dragon, or you could place mana underneath all of the dragons that you currently have on the board. So both of those are good benefits. It's just a matter of what you think would benefit you most of the time. When you cast an elder dragon, it cannot be cast from the corner or the very, very end here. It has to be cast from between spaces 3 and 4. And it's cast in front of the caster, obviously. And it can absorb mana and then use either the abilities of the front side or the flip side. As he moves, you choose which way he's going to move, and he has to follow the same rules of movement as the other dragons on the board. He can't move backwards. If the Elder Dragon gets into the kingdom space of the opposing player and destroys that space, which would be the middle one, he would actually also destroy the adjacent spaces as well. So he would destroy a total of 3 spaces. The only other way to get Elder Dragons is by placing tokens on them. And you do that anytime you block out all of the same color. For one thing, when you block out all of the same color, you can draw another mastery token. But you also, you can put a token of that color onto that dragon. The person who puts the last token onto the Elder Dragon will get it. So you want to be careful about watching out for your opponent's board and saying, well, if he's close to getting, to getting red covered up, then maybe I don't want to be the one that puts the second token on. That would just be setting him up to be able to put the third token on and take that Elder Dragon into his pool. So there are a lot of little, there's some fiddliness with the game for sure, but it's a solid strategy game, and the best part is that it really only does take about 15 minutes to play. You're fairly quickly rolling dragons, getting them on the board, moving them forward, having combat, and then destroying your opponent's kingdom areas. All the details about what exactly each dragon can do are explained in the rulebook, and there are a bunch of different mastery tokens, and they are explained fairly well in the rulebook too. This should be enough information for you to just get the board out and get going and get started playing Dragoncaster. I hope you have fun. Thanks for visiting the Dragon Table.